Although I'm not sure our speaker has ever flown an F-18 Super Hornet, like the Top Gun pilots, I'm pretty sure that his professional career as the CIA station chief in Islamabad, Afghanistan on 9/11 afforded him many supersonic-like moments. After graduation from Williston and then attending Dartmouth College and then earning a master's degree from the University of Virginia, Bob Grenier devoted his professional years in service to the United States government by being a career CIA officer. He chronicled his time in the war in Afghanistan in a book called 88 Days to Kandahar, a CIA Diary, which is a great read for a contemporary history junkie like me. Bob Grenier is a great friend to his alma mater, serving on the Heads Visiting Council, maintaining an active alumni presence, and always answering the call to Williston at every request. When I asked Mr. Grenier to share some reflections with you today, my only prompt was to speak to the virtue of service at a time when government service, especially intelligence services, seem to be under attack. Let's give Mr. Grenier a warm Williston welcome.
Thank you very much, Bob, for your typically generous introduction of me. He's done this before. He always manages to make me sound much better than I am. But this is not about me. This is about you, the students. And so here we are. Or more to the point, here you are at the start of a new academic year. And I know that you have plans and aspirations, academic, one hopes, athletic, personal, social. But I'm not here to talk to you about this year, or next year, or 4 years from now. I'm here to talk to you about a future that you perhaps cannot imagine. Benjamin Barth. Where is that lad? Don't mean to embarrass you, man. But I've had a couple of conversations with Ben, and we've talked about potential careers in public service, foreign affairs, national security, and he may actually have some idea what he's going to do with the rest of his life. Some of the others among you may as well. But if you do, you are very unlike me. Because you see, it may be a little bit hard to imagine right now, but I once sat where you are now. A little hard for me to imagine, frankly. But I was. And when I sat where you are as a senior, I thought I knew what I was going to do with the rest of my life. You see, I'd come under the influence of one of my masters here at Williston. We called them masters in those days, by the way. It's a wonderful, gifted teacher, a man by the name of John Gow. Doc Gow, we called him. I don't know if anybody here remembers him. But I sure do. And under the influence of Doc Gow, I aspired to be a research biologist. Well, my career in research biology did not survive my first brush with college-level chemistry. Just didn't have what it took. And so I ended up being a philosophy major in the end. And as Bob has just explained to you, ended up in the CIA of all things. Imagine. So if you are at all like me, you may have some ideas to what you want to do with the rest of your life. But I'm betting that many of you have no inkling. And so you are preparing yourselves for something that you don't know and maybe can't imagine. Now, there may be one or two wags among you who say, well, yeah, it's a prep school. They're here to prepare us. But listen to me. Like Bob Hill just told you, you are the pilots of your own development here at Williston. You are here to prepare yourselves diligently and well, diffidently and poorly, I don't know which, but you are preparing yourselves, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. But I want to tell you something else that I know and that you may not, and that is that each and every one of you, I'm betting, in some way, shape, or form, to some degree or another, will lead lives of service to others. Now, your life of service may take the form of devotion to just one person. More typically, it'll be to your families, to your communities, religious and civic associations, companies, professional associations. But one way or another, you will give much of your life in service to others. And you need to devote some thought about the direction in which that service will go. Now, while I have you here as relative captives, and by the way, nobody's leaving until I'm done, let me make a little pitch for a particular type of service to others, and that's public service. Now, public service, as the name would imply, is service to the broad public, service to all the people, and not just the people who happen to be in some association of yours. Public service is suffering a particularly bad press these days, and I use that word advisedly. Because public service, one way or another, involves service in government. Whether as an elected official, as a bureaucrat, as an administrator, as a diplomat, as a soldier, maybe as an intelligence officer. In this day and time, there are a great many who have very little faith in our institutions of public service, and maybe some of that is deserved. But even if you are among the naysayers, even if you take the cynical view that our principal institutions of public service are corrupt, it is up to you, it's up to all of us to reform them. It is in the nature of the institutions of public service that they must always reform themselves. Because whether run poorly or well, they're vitally important. Now, a life of public service is worthy no matter the country that's involved. And I know that many of you are from countries other than the United States. But at the risk of sounding a bit parochial here, I want to make a particular pitch for public service in this country. Because the United States is a consequential country, whether we like it or not. We have responsibilities and influence in the world. And so what we do domestically or internationally has great weight. You know, I think it was a former Secretary of State by the name of Dean Rusk. He was Secretary of State back in the 1960s. And he said, I think he summed it up as well as I've ever heard it done when he said that other nations have interests. The United States has responsibilities. That's what led me into public service in this country. But as you think about that a little bit, I want to tell you another little secret, and it's not such a secret. And that is that each and every one of you are going to face crises in your life. You're going to face great challenges. And at some point, I suspect you will have the feeling, as I have, as you confront a challenge in your personal life, your family life, your professional life, that everything you have done up to that moment, whether you knew it or not, was a preparation for that moment. Which leads us back to this whole idea of preparation. You see, it's the knowledge and the character, first and foremost, the experience, we hope the wisdom that you will develop here and when you move on from this place that will determine whether you are successful or whether your challenges in life overwhelm you. Either is possible. As I say, I had a moment like that. It came in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. It may only be a series of numbers to you. It was an event that occurred before any of you was born. But for people of my generation, it was a searing experience. It was one of the great single-day disasters in the history of this country when over 3,000 people were wantonly murdered in a single day. And I was in a position, through no fault of my own, where I was among very few who actually had to do something about it, to try to make sure that nothing like this would ever happen to our country again. But when I think back on those days, I don't think about crossing the Afghan border with weapons and cash and inducing tribal leaders to rise up against the Taliban. I don't think about clandestine meetings with the Taliban leadership. More than anything else, I think about a single dinner that I attended. It was a Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving of 2001, just a few weeks after this great national disaster. And I and about 60 others were invited by the American ambassador in Islamabad, Pakistan, to come and give thanks. And the price of admission was to stand up in front of our peers, each of us in turn, and explain what we were thankful for. Now, we were working pretty hard in those days. We were working 16 and 18-hour days, 7 days a week. Didn't give very much time for reflection. But there's something about standing up in front of your peers and giving account of yourself that sort of concentrates the mind. And that was a bit of an epiphany for me, because I stopped and I thought about it. I thought about how few of us there were who had been given the responsibility of responding in the field to the events of 9/11. And what a huge privilege that was. What a privilege that was. And so when I stood up to speak, I said, we would never have had this happen. We would never have wished such an event on our country. We would never have wished to see over 3,000 of our citizens slaughtered in a single day. But if it had to happen, thank God it happened on our watch, where we had the privilege of doing something about it. Should we give thanks today? I said yes. Yes, we should give thanks. We should give thanks for the opportunity to serve. And so, as you go about this year preparing yourselves for an indefinite future, I hope that you'll give the occasional thought to where and how you will exercise the opportunity to serve. Thank you.